Welcome. I'm Kim Weissenborn. Today we're going to learn from the master Claude Monet. Of course, he painted in oil, but we can learn a lot from his painting, A Woman with a Parasol. My goal is always to be a loose painter, so I find artists that mirror my goal as an artist. Monet is one of those artists. He was an impressionist, meaning his paintings were considered impressions of the subject matter he painted. Looseness and impressionism go hand in hand. Keep in mind we will not be copying Monet's painting as if we were forgers. We'll simply be referencing his painting to glean ideas for composition, value, color, and brushstroke. For our painting, we will be using only 3 colors: phthalo blue, opera, and Aurelian yellow. Let's get started. I'm starting the painting on dry paper using a mixture of just phthalo blue and rose, opera rose. Notice how I'm holding the brush at the tip or the end so as not to have any detail at this stage. And I'm just barely touching the paper with the tip of the brush, the side of the brush, leaving white. The white will represent the clouds. Since there's no white in watercolor, you have to leave the white of the paper. I'm not making a flat wash of phthalo blue and rose. I'm allowing the 2 colors to separate a little bit as I go. And if I get too strong, I'll just dry my brush and suck up some of the color with a thirsty brush. I'm going very slowly, trying to make sure I have the sky showing behind the clouds, but not too much. You could easily cover this up too quickly and then lose your clouds, so you want to be real careful to leave enough white so that you have clouds in the end. I'm using a side-to-side motion rather than a vertical up and down. And it's almost as if the brush strokes in his painting are cradling the clouds. And that's the effect that I want to get with my brush stroke as well. So that's why I'm using the side-to-side. Notice how the sky gets a little bit less colorful as you go down toward the horizon. So I mixed the other colors in with that blue to tone it down just a little bit. Sucking up some of the color with a thirsty brush. Seemed like it was a little strong. Very easy to get lost in what you're doing. Just make sure you see the cloud is a solid, that big cloud on the left, and try not to fill it in. Now I'm warming up the color a little bit of opera and Aurelian mixed with the blue. I'm just letting it touch the wet paint, the blue paint that I already put in, so I get a nice soft transition. It's very hard to match that color exactly, so you may have to try it a few times. You may have to spend a lot of time mixing if you're not real familiar with mixing. It's a really good practice. It's like tying your shoes. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And working with 3 colors, you will achieve more harmony in your paintings. I'm just trying to find places where I can put this color that I have on my brush. I'm always trying to use the rest of the color where I can. That also creates harmony in your painting, moving the color around. Now I'm mixing the color for the parasol. I'm using the phthalo blue and the yellow, Aurelian yellow. And again, with the same technique, I'm just dabbing the brush, not using, not holding the very ferrule, but holding it more toward the end, so as not to get too much finickiness with my brush stroke. I'm leaving some of the, I don't know what those are called, those things that hold the umbrella up. I'm leaving some spaces for those. Leaving some whites, always leave a little bit of white. Now it looks like I'm pulling out some of the green that I just put in. Yeah, pulling out a little bit with my thirsty brush. Now I'm going to go in with some shadow color. So I'm mixing red in with the green. I'm finding it's a little too brown, so I'm going to go a little more purple. And pull it out a little bit. It's a little too brown for me, so I'm going to go more with purple. That looks better. I like that. So that looks like a shadow. And breaking up that big long line with a little bit of the green. And a little shadow where the stick meets the umbrella. Now I'm going to put in her dress. I noticed with her dress in this painting, it's very unusual how he separated the shadows with the dress color so specifically. It's interesting, creates a really interesting pattern, but not very realistic, which is kind of nice. I like that. So I'm going to start out with a really bright phthalo blue and then possibly glaze over it later with maybe a little light glaze of orange to tone it down, but it's always better to go bright first. You can always tone it down later, but it's hard to bring back bright once you lose it. So I'm just leaving those spaces for the lines that he has for the shadows. And I'm not doing it exactly, obviously. It's I don't want to be so carefully following every little line and shape. It would make my painting very stiff, so I have to be careful not to be too fussy. Just getting the feel of the dress. And I'm going to put in some of those warm areas on her coat. It looks like she's got some sort of a yellow patch there. I'm going to try to find other places to put that yellow while I've got it in my brush. Might as well, right? Now the face. Now she has a veil on her face, so you have to make room for that and leave lights, like almost light stripes across her face. It seems like it would be really hard to do the veil, but don't overthink it. It's really not that hard and not that complicated. It's just a matter of softness, subtle changes. I'm doing the stick and I'm using a mixture. If you mix an orange and then put a little blue in it, you'll get a brown. So that's what I'm in. Now his face, usually I'll put the color down first, like a color, and then I'll fill it in with the color I really want. So I'm not real careful about my first application of color. I can always change it by adding another color later. Now I'm going to do the stick. Notice how I'm holding the brush to get a little bit more accuracy. It's kind of hard to do a straight line when you're holding the brush on the very end. But I'm not making it so perfect. I'm not getting out my ruler Using that brown in other places. Always try to find other places you could put a color that's already in your brush. And I'm not worried that his face is dry or wet. I'm just putting a little brown on the end where there's a shadow. And I'm touching his face with this blue shirt. I'm not worried about it all bleeding together. And I'm also going around the flowers that are in front of him so that I can put those in later. Adding a little bit of purple. Now adding a little bit of her hat. So you just sort of copy what you see and the veil should come out. Now I've mixed some yellow with the rose and I'm adding some grass. Now the grass is more of a vertical. You're using more vertical strokes. So you're following the contour of the grass with your strokes. Also leaving a lot of white behind to start with. So you're trying to make an interesting pattern and not trying to have your brush stroke be the same every single time. You want small, big, fat, thin dots, you know, just a little bit of variety will make an interesting pattern. They're all kind of going, I'm noticing, in a diagonal pattern, like to the right. And I don't know that that was purposeful, that's just something I ended up doing. Just keep in mind that your painting is going to be very different than mine because you're a different person. You have a different way of approaching a brush stroke, so try not to be discouraged that your painting doesn't look exactly like mine. Yours is going to be yours, and as long as you do the basics, you're going to end up with a really nice painting. So now I'm trying to figure out the color of the shadow. I tried this before and it ended up getting really muddy, so I decided this time I'm going to use a purple, a lavender, and because it's the complement of the grass color right now, yellow, and I can always go over it later and change it, but I'm going to start with that color. And I'm just putting, see the three shapes in the shadow of the grass? There's a big thick line down the middle. I'll wait till the picture comes back. I'm just finding other places for the purple. Okay, on the painting in the left, you will see the shadows in the grass. They look like a thick vertical and two circles on each side. Those need to be as clearly established in your painting as they are in Monet's painting. So when you mix that lavender and that yellow together, you get kind of a brown. So that's kind of nice, and that's what I'm using to go around the picture. Okay, so on the top of his hat. Just finding places for this color. Opera and yellow. And then opera and yellow with a little bit of blue. That's what I'm trying to mix the shadow colors in the dress. It's kind of like an orangey purple. So right now I'm starting with orange. I'm going to go a little purple. There we go, a little more purple. Pulling it out a little bit. So there's a lot of adjusting that happens when I put something in. I'm not really sure it's going to be right until I put it in. And if it's not right, I'll pull it out and I'll add another color. I'm mixing on the paper. That's another technique of looseness, not to be so accurate with your color going in, to let some of the colors, you just figure some of those colors out as you go. That should give you a lot of freedom and not be so worried. Most of the time I have no idea what color it's going to look like until I actually put it down on the paper. So filling in some of the spaces of the shadow, some of the whites. Because it is shadow, you're not going to have really too many whites there. So I'm putting greens in there. Olives. So I'm constantly trying to establish the values, like the values of the shadows on the grass, and then she's obviously a solid value darker than the sky, and he is too. So she's not going to have really any whites on her. The umbrella is not going to, and he's not really going to, not too many if at all. So you want to just make sure that she reads as a solid shape against the sky, and that's how you do that with value. Notice how I'm working around the painting. I'm not really staying in one area too long. I'm slowly building as I go around the painting. No one area should be completely finished. It should only be finished at the end. I'm noticing that the top of the sky needs to be darker, so I'm finding the color for that. And as I go over the sky again, I try to make sure I don't go over it solid, that I leave underpainting showing through. It can be the blue underpainting. It doesn't have to be the white underpainting. It can be both even. So I'm slowly building that sky, making sure that I get that feeling of a cloud. Right now there's not the feeling of a cloud, so I'm going to have to keep working on that. Now I'm filling in the value a little more close together in value, not so separate, light and dark, more one solid value, but varied colors. So she was dry, the dress was dry, so I'm just going over with another glaze of light blue, just to darken her up a bit and solidify her, make her more one solid shape. See how she's starting to stand up out against the sky a little more? Since I've done that, I have to do her face too eventually, and the umbrella. They should all be in the same value. So I'm darkening the umbrella underneath, also leaving some underpainting showing through. Darkening the sky a little bit, just to make those clouds come out a little more. Don't want to darken it so much that they're as dark as she is, but at least not when I come near her dress, I want it to be a little bit lighter. Actually, the dark around her dress, where the folds are lighter, if you go dark around them, it'll bring the folds out a little better. The light's hitting the back of her dress, so you want to show that with the darkening of the sky behind her dress. And I know I have to darken this shadow up a bit. Just getting a little texture in the grass so it's not flat. And darken up there. It's a little wet still, so it's good. I'm just dropping in some colors. It's already quite beautiful as it is, so if you find your painting is gorgeous, you know, it's always a question whether to stop or not. You could stop for a while and look at it and see if it really needs to be going further or not. Definitely need to darken that umbrella. So good. I'm glad I'm doing that. I think that looks great. It's just almost pure phthalo blue on top of that. Brightened it up a bit. Just finding other places for it. Still holding the end of the brush. You'll notice the further toward the end of the painting you get, the closer your hand creeps toward the front of the brush. When you start it, it's always at the end, and then it moves slowly. I think I've used this one brush through the whole painting. I haven't changed. It's a great brush, but I am working fairly small. This is like a quarter-size sheet of watercolor paper, maybe 11 by 15. So the bigger you work, the bigger your brush. This is a perfect brush. It holds a lot of water and it comes to a nice point. And there's really nothing in this painting that requires a fine detail brush. So if you're using a fine detail brush, it's going to hamper you from becoming a loose painter. You want to really work with bigger brushes if you can. Okay, I'm putting in some dark lines for her dress, but I'm finding later as I look at it, I went too dark, so you'll see how I resolve that problem. A little bit later I'll show you what I do about that. Hopefully it's comforting for you to know that I don't always know what I'm doing, and I have a lot of areas where I change or backtrack. I think that's with any artist. Felt like I did her eyes too dark, so I wiped them out a little bit. You notice that you have to continually redefine darks. It's not a one-time thing usually. You have to go over it a few times to really establish the darks. I'm bringing out the points in the umbrella. Very important. A little bit of dark on the points. That will give you your shape. Starting to come together, except for that shadow down below her. I think that really needs to go darker. Now remember, we're not copying him exactly, we're just using it as a reference. In watercolor, you don't always have to go so dark. It can be a little more light and a little more textured. Just adding a little more texture to the grass. But in doing that, I'm bringing my shadow and my grass values way too close, so I'm going to have to deepen my shadow for sure. Oh, I've got a smaller brush. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm signing my name already. Way before I'm done. Sometimes I do that because I want to balance the picture. But I think at this point I thought I was done, but after I looked at it I realized I wasn't. And sometimes when you're so close to it you can't see what it needs. So you need to get back. It's the only time I pull out a detail brush is for signing the picture. So once it's wet with a color, then I can drop in some dark green. And probably because this is a copy of Monet, I shouldn't be signing my name to it, but oh well. Okay, here's where I'm softening some of those darks that I was telling you about earlier. I'm just sort of rubbing through it with a clean brush and making her a little more subtle. I was having trouble getting clean color, so I had to rinse my palette out. Now here we go with some darker value. I realized I needed darker shadows. Actually, no, I'm still filling in the grass a little more. I'm giving it more of a cooler color by going over with just pale phthalo blue. Using that same pale phthalo blue to go over some of the dress again, just to darken her up just a bit. Make her a little more solid. The sky a little more. Just plain phthalo blue with a lot of water. If you use phthalo blue straight, you're going to be very disappointed. You have to dilute it quite a bit to get it to be less intense. So I even covered her whole face because I felt like she was too light, just with the same phthalo blue. Just really solidified the painting a little more. And now I'm going over phthalo blue over the shadow, giving it a little more oomph. Already better. Yes. I'm liking this. Just plain phthalo blue over everything. You'll find by doing that you're just sort of tying the painting together a little better too. It's a little more cohesive. Having a dominant color makes a painting more cohesive. Oh yeah, that's lovely. I'm about finished. Just adding a little bit of dark detail. Don't know if I should have done that. Because again, I'm tying the grass and the shadows back together in value and I'm not seeing the separation. So I'm going to have to go yet even darker with my value, which is not a big deal. Still can do it. Putting a little of that green in other places. Seeing it in the sky up there. Just helps harmonize the painting more when you can bounce the color around in different places. So just trying to find that dark that's in the clouds. Give the clouds a little more dimension. Sort of a dull dark, like a lavender. So you mix blue with a little bit of red and a tiny, tiny bit of yellow to neutralize it. So you're making a purple and then neutralizing it and then adding a lot of water so that it's not too dark. I feel I needed some darks. I'll probably most likely use that for the shadow. We'll see. Yes. Oh yes. That's what was needed. This is the long vertical with the 2 dots on each side. Very important. There we go. I'm going to darken that stick on the umbrella. Not everywhere. You don't have to make a complete line. Sometimes it's more suggestive if you just break the line. I'm not continuously following every line right to the end. I break the line. So just like in nature, you don't see a continuous line in anything really. So just adding the finishing touches, the darks. That looks looking good. Just a few little darks. You gotta be careful, don't go too crazy. It helps to squint if you're having trouble seeing the darks and the lights. Squint, and that will take away the detail and give you the shapes, the basic shapes, and help you to see the value better. Darken up the sky just a little bit more. Just the top. Top is a little darker than the bottom, so it helps the composition, helps draw the eye around. Very interesting how he uses the values to draw your eye around the picture. Okay, I'm about finished. I hope you enjoyed this lesson and found it helpful. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment.